At dinner, my daughter insisted I drink the coffee she made. I switched it, and what happened next changed everything. My own daughter, Michelle, 42 years old and a registered nurse, collapsed at my dining room table 20 minutes after drinking the coffee she'd prepared to poison me with. The doctors at Grady Hospital told us she'd been injected with enough insulin to kill 5 diabetics, and that's when I realized my baby girl had been planning to murder her own father for months. If you've ever suspected your own child was trying to kill you, if you know what it feels like to watch someone you raised drink their own poison meant for you, if you've ever had to choose between trusting your instincts or trusting your family, pull up that chair and hold on tight. Because this story is going to show you that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who have medical training and unlimited access to your kitchen. And sometimes the only way to expose a killer is to let them poison themselves with their own deadly plan. I'm Robert Williams, 74 years old, been living in Atlanta my whole life, and spent 42 years building Williams Family Restaurants from a single soul food joint into a chain of 12 locations that's now worth $4 million. My late wife Helen and I started with nothing but her grandmother's recipes and my determination to create something that would feed our community and provide for our family for generations. Helen passed 3 years ago from complications related to kidney disease, and losing her left me not just heartbroken, but vulnerable in ways I never expected. That's when my daughter Michelle, the baby I'd put through nursing school and supported through every challenge in her life, started her campaign to take better care of Dad, now that Mom wasn't around to manage my health and my household. Michelle had always been the devoted daughter, the one who remembered my doctor appointments, checked my blood sugar levels, and made sure I was taking my diabetes medications properly. As a registered nurse with 18 years of experience, she seemed like a blessing for a diabetic widower who was struggling to maintain the strict dietary and medical routines that Helen had managed so carefully. What I didn't realize until it was almost too late was that Michelle wasn't trying to help me manage my diabetes. She was planning to use it to kill me. My own daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was using her medical knowledge and my trust to plan a murder that would look like a tragic diabetic episode, leaving her free to inherit my restaurants and my money without having to wait for natural death. The warning signs had been there for months. My blood sugar levels fluctuating wildly despite following the same diet and medication routine, unexplained episodes of weakness and confusion, and Michelle's insistence on preparing all my meals and managing all my medications personally. But I'd trusted her completely because she was my daughter and my nurse, never imagining that the person supposed to keep me alive was actually planning my death. That evening, when Michelle insisted I drink the special coffee she'd made for my health, was supposed to be the night her murder plan finally succeeded. Instead, it became the night her evil backfired in the most dramatic way possible, when a father's suspicious instincts turned a daughter's poison into her own downfall. And if you're wondering how switching coffee cups led to my daughter's attempted murder conviction and a family scandal that made national headlines, well, hit that subscribe button on Grandpa's Diaries. Because this story's about to show you that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones planning your funeral. And sometimes the only way to survive your own family is to be more suspicious than they are deadly. Michelle used to be my little helper in the restaurant kitchen, the daughter who'd stand on a milk crate next to me while I cooked, asking a million questions about seasoning and timing, and what made our family recipes special. When she was 8 years old, she'd help me count the register money at closing time, wearing a tiny apron that Helen had made for her, proud to be part of the family business that was putting food on tables across Atlanta. I remember the day she told me she wanted to be a nurse instead of taking over the restaurants, sitting at our kitchen table when she was 16, and explaining that she wanted to help people in a different way than feeding them. "Daddy," she said, "I love our restaurants, but I want to save lives, not just serve meals. I want to use my brain to help people feel better when they're sick." Helen and I supported Michelle's dream completely, even though it meant she wouldn't be carrying on the family business tradition. We paid every penny of her nursing school tuition at Emory University, bought her textbooks and uniforms, and celebrated when she passed her state boards and got her first job at Grady Hospital. "Baby girl," I told her at her graduation, "I'm proud of you for following your heart and choosing a career that helps people." Michelle seemed to live up to the values we'd taught her for years. She worked hard, advanced in her profession, and always made time to help with family medical issues. When Helen got sick with kidney disease, Michelle was there every day, consulting with doctors, researching treatment options, and making sure her mother got the best possible care until the very end. After Helen's funeral, Michelle became even more involved in managing my health and household affairs. She'd visit 3 times a week, bringing groceries and checking my blood sugar levels, always asking detailed questions about my symptoms and my medication compliance. "Daddy," she'd say, "you're all I have left now, and I'm going to make sure you stay healthy and safe." What I thought was exceptional devotion from a loving daughter was actually the beginning of a carefully planned murder scheme. Michelle had access to my complete medical history, detailed knowledge of my diabetes management routine, and professional expertise that would allow her to kill me in ways that would look like natural progression of my disease. The first warning sign should have been how Michelle started talking about my deteriorating condition even when I felt fine. She'd make comments about how difficult diabetes was for elderly people to manage, how easy it was for diabetics to have fatal episodes, and how important it was for me to get my affairs in order while I was still mentally sharp enough to make good decisions. But Michelle's concerns about my health weren't motivated by medical expertise. They were motivated by greed and impatience. As my only child, she knew she was the sole beneficiary of my will, but she didn't want to wait for natural death to claim her inheritance from the restaurants and property I'd built over 4 decades of hard work. The systematic manipulation began about 18 months after Helen's funeral, when Michelle started insisting on preparing all my meals and managing all my medications personally. She claimed that my blood sugar control had become too unpredictable for me to handle safely on my own, and that her nursing expertise was essential for preventing dangerous diabetic episodes. "Daddy," she'd say during her increasingly frequent visits, "diabetes is a killer for people your age, and you can't afford to make mistakes with your diet or your medication timing. Let me take over the medical stuff so you can focus on enjoying your retirement without worrying about health management." Michelle would arrive at my house with pre-planned meals that she claimed were perfectly calculated for my diabetic dietary needs, and she'd organize my insulin injections with the precision of a medical professional. She'd test my blood sugar multiple times during each visit, keeping detailed records that she said would help track patterns and prevent emergencies. But instead of improving, my diabetes control got significantly worse under Michelle's management. My blood sugar levels started fluctuating wildly, sometimes dangerously high, sometimes dangerously low, despite following exactly the diet and medication routine she'd established. I began having episodes of confusion, weakness, and near fainting that I'd never experienced during the years when Helen managed my care. When I mentioned these concerning symptoms to my endocrinologist, Dr. Anderson, he was alarmed enough to order comprehensive blood tests and review my entire treatment protocol. "Mr. Williams," he said, "your glucose patterns don't make sense given your current insulin regimen. Are you taking any additional medications or supplements that we haven't discussed?" I told Dr. Anderson about Michelle's meal planning and medication management, and his expression became serious. "I'd like to speak with your daughter about her approach to your diabetes care," he said. "Some of the symptoms you're describing could indicate medication errors or drug interactions that need immediate attention." When I mentioned Dr. Anderson's request to Michelle, her reaction was immediate and defensive. "Daddy, that doctor doesn't understand individualized diabetes management," she said. "He's using outdated protocols while I'm providing personalized care based on my direct observation of your daily patterns. You need to decide whether you trust your daughter or whether you trust someone who sees you for 20 minutes every 3 months. Michelle's emotional manipulation was sophisticated and heartbreaking. She'd alternate between expressing hurt that I didn't trust her professional judgment and warning me about the dangers of too many medical opinions, confusing my treatment. Every conversation became about choosing family loyalty over outside medical interference. "Daddy, I'm a registered nurse with 18 years of experience in medical management," she'd say when I expressed doubts about my worsening symptoms. "I've taken care of hundreds of diabetic patients, and I know exactly what your body needs to stay stable. Don't you think I want what's best for my own father?" The episodes continued getting worse over the following months. I lost 25 pounds, started having trouble concentrating during business meetings, and felt constantly exhausted despite following Michelle's care plan exactly. She would express concern about my declining health while simultaneously discouraging me from seeking additional medical opinions or changing my treatment approach. What I didn't understand then was that Michelle's personalized diabetes management was actually a systematic poisoning scheme designed to make my death look like natural progression of diabetic complications. She was manipulating my insulin doses and dietary intake to create dangerous blood sugar swings that would eventually lead to a fatal diabetic coma, leaving her free to inherit my businesses without suspicion of foul play. The final murder attempt happened on a Thursday evening in October, during what I thought was going to be a normal dinner with Michelle at my house. She'd been particularly attentive that week, calling multiple times each day to check on my blood sugar levels and bringing me what she claimed were new diabetic-friendly recipes that would help stabilize my glucose patterns. "Daddy," she said as we finished eating the meal she'd prepared, "I need to give you something special tonight. I've been researching some breakthrough supplements that can help diabetic patients avoid the kind of dangerous episodes you've been having lately." Michelle pulled out a small vial containing what she claimed was a natural blood sugar stabilizer that had been specially formulated for elderly diabetics with my risk profile. She insisted on preparing the supplement herself, mixing it into a cup of coffee that she said would help my body absorb the medication more effectively. "This treatment is very precise," she explained while measuring ingredients I couldn't identify, "and it needs to be taken with caffeine to activate the therapeutic compounds. It's designed to prevent the kind of diabetic coma that could happen at any time given your recent instability." Something about Michelle's behavior that evening felt different, more nervous, more urgent, like she was under pressure to complete a task that had been delayed too long. She kept checking her watch and seemed anxious about making sure I consumed the coffee at exactly the right time, relative to my dinner and my evening insulin injection. "Daddy, you need to drink all of this right now," she said, pushing the coffee cup toward me with unusual insistence. "The timing is critical for this type of supplement. It won't work properly unless you take it within 30 minutes of your meal." That's when I noticed something that probably saved my life. While Michelle was explaining the importance of drinking the coffee immediately, she turned away to check something on her phone, and I caught a glimpse of medical supplies in her purse: insulin vials, syringes, and what looked like a calculator for dosage computations. The sight of those supplies triggered every suspicious instinct I'd been suppressing for months. Michelle claimed to be giving me a natural supplement, but she'd brought enough insulin to treat a dozen diabetics. She was planning something that required precise medical calculations, not just herbal remedies. While she was distracted with her phone, I quickly switched our coffee cups, moving mine to her side of the table and replacing it with her identical cup that had been sitting untouched. The movement was subtle and fast, and Michelle didn't notice because she was focused on timing whatever medical procedure she'd planned to follow the coffee consumption. "Drink it all, Daddy," Michelle said, lifting what she thought was her harmless cup to demonstrate how safe the supplement was. "See? It doesn't taste bad at all, just a little bitter like most health drinks." I watched in horror and fascination as my own daughter drank the poison she'd prepared to kill me. She drained the entire cup while maintaining eye contact, probably expecting me to follow her example and consume what she thought was my lethal dose. 20 minutes later, Michelle collapsed at my dining room table, her body convulsing violently as insulin shock began shutting down her system. I called 911 immediately while trying to process the fact that my baby girl had just poisoned herself with medication intended to murder her father, and that I was watching her experience the death she'd planned for me. At Grady Hospital, the emergency room team worked frantically to save Michelle's life while I sat in the waiting room, trying to process the fact that my own daughter had just tried to murder me with insulin. The medical staff initially assumed that Michelle had accidentally injected herself with too much medication, but Dr. Patricia Chen, the emergency physician treating her, immediately recognized signs of massive insulin overdose. This woman has been poisoned with an enormous dose of rapid-acting insulin, Dr. Chen told the medical team. The amount in her system is at least 20 times a normal therapeutic dose. Someone gave her enough insulin to kill 5 diabetic patients. I knew I had to tell the truth about what had happened, even though it meant admitting that my own daughter had tried to murder me. Detective Marcus Johnson was called to investigate what the hospital had reported as a possible suicide attempt or accidental medical overdose. "Detective," I said, "my daughter didn't try to kill herself, and this wasn't an accident. She was trying to poison me with insulin disguised as a health supplement, but I switched our coffee cups when she wasn't looking. She drank the poison she prepared to kill me with." I explained Michelle's months of suspicious medical management, my worsening diabetic symptoms under her care, and the coffee cup switching incident that had just occurred. Detective Johnson listened carefully, taking detailed notes about Michelle's access to insulin and her behavior leading up to the poisoning. "Mr. Williams," he said, "what you're describing is attempted murder by someone with medical training and access to lethal drugs. If you're right, your daughter has been systematically manipulating your diabetes treatment while planning to kill you with an insulin overdose that would look like a natural diabetic emergency." My blood tests revealed exactly what Dr. Chen had suspected. My glucose levels had been artificially manipulated for months, with evidence of irregular insulin administration that didn't match my prescribed treatment protocol. The patterns suggested deliberate medical sabotage designed to make my death look like diabetic complications. Within 48 hours, Detective Johnson had obtained search warrants for Michelle's apartment, her workplace at the hospital, and her financial records. What he found was a murder conspiracy that had been months in the planning, research on untraceable insulin administration, calculations of lethal dosages, and detailed planning for my expected death. Michelle's medical supply access records showed that she'd been stealing insulin and syringes from the hospital pharmacy, claiming they were for diabetic patients who needed emergency supplies. She'd been systematically acquiring the drugs needed to kill me while using her professional credentials to avoid suspicion from colleagues and supervisors. The most damning evidence was discovered on Michelle's personal computer. Detailed research on inheritance laws, insurance policies, and financial planning documents showing how she intended to use my death to expand the restaurant business under her ownership. She'd been planning not just my murder, but the liquidation of everything I'd built. Detective Johnson also found communications between Michelle and financial advisors about preparing for inheritance transition and managing family business succession after health-related death. She'd been discussing my murder with professional consultants while pretending to provide loving medical care. But the most chilling discovery was Michelle's nursing journal, where she'd been documenting my declining diabetic control as evidence that my death would appear natural. "Dad's glucose patterns are becoming increasingly unstable," one entry read. "A fatal diabetic coma would surprise no one at this point. Time to finish what I started." The criminal trial took place 11 months later after Michelle had recovered from her self-inflicted insulin poisoning and been deemed mentally competent to stand trial. The courtroom was packed with community members who'd followed the case through extensive media coverage, shocked by the story of a nurse trying to murder her diabetic father for inheritance money. Michelle had hired the most expensive criminal defense team in Georgia, lawyers who specialized in defending medical professionals accused of harming patients. Their strategy was to claim that I was a confused elderly diabetic who'd misunderstood Michelle's legitimate medical care, and that the insulin overdose was a tragic accident caused by medication errors. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Michelle's lead attorney said during opening statements, "this case isn't about attempted murder or inheritance conspiracy. This is about a devoted daughter trying to care for her aging father's complex medical needs and a tragic misunderstanding that resulted in accidental poisoning during a routine supplement administration. But their defense strategy collapsed under the weight of scientific evidence and Michelle's own documented planning." Dr. Chen testified about the massive insulin concentration found in Michelle's blood, explaining that the dosage could only have resulted from deliberate preparation rather than accidental administration. Detective Johnson presented Michelle's research files showing months of planning for my murder and the financial benefits she expected to receive. The jury heard recordings of Michelle discussing my deteriorating condition with insurance agents and business consultants, clearly planning for my death while pretending to provide loving care. The defendant wasn't trying to help her father manage his diabetes, the prosecutor explained to the jury. She was systematically sabotaging his medical care while planning to kill him with an insulin overdose that would appear to be a natural diabetic emergency. The fact that she poisoned herself reveals both the lethal nature of her intentions and the premeditated planning behind her actions. My testimony was the most heartbreaking part of the trial. I had to describe months of trusting my daughter's medical expertise while she was slowly destabilizing my health, and the moment I realized she was trying to murder me for my restaurants and money. Michelle was my baby girl, I told the jury. I paid for her nursing education, supported her career, and trusted her with my life. Learning that she was using that trust to plan my death is something no parent should ever have to experience. The evidence was overwhelming. Michelle's hospital colleagues testified about her suspicious requests for extra insulin supplies. Financial experts explained how my death would have benefited her inheritance. Medical experts demonstrated how she'd been manipulating my diabetes care to create conditions for a fatal episode. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on charges of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, medical fraud, and theft of controlled substances. Michelle showed no emotion when the verdicts were read, probably still believing that her medical training would protect her from serious consequences. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Michelle to life in prison without possibility of parole for 25 years. This court has never seen such a calculated abuse of medical trust and family relationship, she said during sentencing. The defendant used her nursing expertise and father's love to plan a murder that would have appeared to be natural death, showing a level of professional betrayal and filial cruelty that demands the maximum penalty under law. The courtroom erupted in applause when the sentence was announced. Michelle sat in stunned silence, probably realizing for the first time that her greed had cost her everything: her freedom, her nursing license, her relationship with her father, and any chance of ever benefiting from the inheritance she'd tried to steal through murder. 4 years have passed since that terrible Thursday evening when I caught my daughter trying to poison me and watched her accidentally poison herself with her own murder weapon, and Williams Family Restaurants is thriving under new management that ensures my employees and my community will continue to be served long after I'm gone. The business is now structured as a community trust, with my nephew James as CEO and profits committed to diabetes education and elder abuse prevention programs. Michelle is serving her sentence at Metro State Prison, and she's never attempted to contact me since her conviction. She'll be eligible for parole when she's 67 years old, probably too old, and institutionalized to pose any further threat to anyone. Her nursing license was permanently revoked, and she can never again work in any medical capacity that gives her access to vulnerable patients. My diabetes is now perfectly controlled under the care of Dr. Anderson and a medical team that has no family relationship to compromise their professional judgment. The dangerous glucose swings and mysterious symptoms that plagued me for months under Michelle's care disappeared completely once I returned to proper medical management. I'm now 78 years old and healthier than I was at 74, before Michelle's murder campaign began. The most important outcome of this experience has been establishing the Helen Williams Foundation for Elder Medical Abuse Prevention, which provides education and resources to help elderly people recognize when family members might be exploiting their medical vulnerabilities for financial gain. We've learned that medical abuse by family members is more common than most people realize, especially when the perpetrators have professional healthcare training. Uncle Robert, my nephew James, asked me recently, "Do you think Aunt Michelle ever really loved you? Or was it always about inheriting the restaurants?" I thought about that question while we walked through our flagship location, where Helen and I had started with nothing but determination and her grandmother's recipes. "Son," I finally said, "I think Michelle loved the idea of having a successful father who could provide for her, but she never learned to love the actual person I was. When my death became more valuable to her than my life, she chose murder over patience. The experience taught me something important about trust, family, and the corrupting power of inheritance expectations. Michelle wasn't a desperate criminal driven to murder by poverty. She was an educated medical professional who thought her nursing knowledge gave her the right to kill her father for money she hadn't earned and didn't need immediately. The coffee cup switch that saved my life was probably the most fortunate moment in Williams family history. But it was also the moment that revealed who my daughter really was when money was involved. She was willing to watch me die slowly from manipulated medical care, using her professional expertise to torture me for months while pretending to provide loving family support. My will has been completely restructured to ensure that no family member can ever again be motivated to hurt me for inheritance. Everything goes to community programs and employee ownership initiatives with detailed instructions that no blood relative should benefit financially from my death. If Michelle had been patient and loving, she would have inherited millions. Instead, her greed cost her everything and ensured that my wealth will help people who actually deserve it. The most frightening part of this story is how easily Michelle could have succeeded if I hadn't been suspicious enough to catch her preparing the poisoned coffee. Medical professionals who abuse elderly family members have tremendous advantages: access to lethal drugs, knowledge of fatal dosages, and professional credibility that makes their victims' deaths look like natural health complications. The dining room where Michelle tried to poison me has been completely redecorated, but I still eat my meals at the same table where Helen and I shared 41 years of family dinners. Now I know that no one can ever again use that space to hurt me, and that every meal I eat there represents a victory over someone who thought my death was worth more than my love. Tell me in the comments, have you ever suspected that family members with medical training might be tampering with your medications or treatment? Have you ever noticed unexplained health symptoms that started when certain people began helping with your medical care? Have you ever realized that the people who claim to love you most might be the ones most likely to hurt you when inheritance money is involved? And if this story reminded you to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. About family members' medical advice, hit that subscribe button for Grandpa's Diaries. I've got more stories about surviving betrayal by the people you trust most, about recognizing when professional expertise is being used as a weapon against you, and about learning that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who have both medical knowledge and family access. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that putting someone through nursing school doesn't guarantee they'll use that education to help you. And sometimes the children you sacrifice everything for will sacrifice you for nothing more than money they're too impatient to inherit naturally. I'll see you next week with another cup of coffee and another truth about what happens when medical knowledge meets family greed, and how sometimes the only way to survive your own children is to be more suspicious than they are skilled at killing you.